following video contains scenes of a graphic nature. They involve pictures and video footage from the crashes at Pocono from this past weekend. Nobody was hurt, but this video may contain scenes that you may find upsetting. Just as a warning. Thanks for watching. Hey guys, Dre here, back at it once again with another video blog for you. And I'm not gonna lie to you guys here. This is up there, probably in the conversation as one of the hardest video blogs or hardest subject matters I've ever had to break down. Not for emotional reasons, but because it's one that's deeply conflicted in my mind. A little bit of a fourth wall breaker here to start off with. This was originally going to be a Dre brief video. I changed my mind. The reason why I changed my mind was because, well, I couldn't get down what I wanted to say in 600 to 700 words. And even then, I'd not felt this way about a video since the Hamilton-Vettel clash at Baku, the Dre brief we did about that. Mostly because normally when I do these sorts of videos, I've already got a good idea of the overall points I want to make in them. It's just a matter of laying out that point on paper. This time round, I'm still on the fence about the whole thing. It's hard. It's a hard subject matter with a lot to break down in between. Now, in case you already aren't aware, you've clicked the video and seen the title. This is a video that's going to be about what happened at IndyCar this past weekend at Pocono. For those guys who haven't seen it, here's a quick breakdown of what happened. It was the very first lap of the race. Alex Rossi, who started the race from the front row of the grid, it was a race that was started on championship order because there was no qualifying session. That's how IndyCar's rules are. If there's no qualifying session, you had a 2-hour practice, but the grid is formed on championship order, basically. Rossi got a slow getaway. He already lost the position to Simon Pagenaud on the opening bend. He's now running 3 wide on the straight towards turn 2 at Pocono, which is, again, a triangle-shaped oval. He's in the middle of a 3 wide, and he's got a lack of momentum compared to Ryan Hunter-Reay on his left and Takuma Sato on his right. Takuma kind of turns in on him halfway down the straight, and there's a hellacious accident. It's an accident where 5 cars got collected. The 3 guys I just mentioned, as well as James Hinchcliffe, who had nowhere to go in the accident, and Felix Rosenquist, who sadly was launched off the barrier into the catch fence. It actually ripped off the tub of the front of his car. He was several hundred meters down the road compared to the other cars in the accident, and it actually took the safety team several minutes to catch up with where his car eventually stopped so they could check him over. Thankfully, nobody was hurt in this accident. Felix got off the worst of it. He had to go to the trauma center afterwards, but he would turn out to be fine. He was cleared for full racing duties yesterday. So thankfully, all 5 people involved in this accident was able to walk away. However, this is the 3rd major incident that this track has had in the last 5 years. The 2 other main prominent ones that are most notable are the awful accident with Sage Karam and Justin Wilson that sadly took Wilson's life in 2015. And last year, obviously, almost a year to the day, as a matter of fact, since Robert Wickens and his accident where he clips Ryan Hunter-Reay and spins into the catch fence at 210 miles an hour. A race that, was life-threatening for Robert Wickens, had to be airlifted to hospital. We really didn't know his condition for several days after it initially happened. There was a lot of speculation. At best, we're going to call it a life-altering accident. We still don't know whether Wickens will ever drive a race car again. We still don't know just how much his back will recover as a result of this accident. So, it's heavy duty, to say the least. Now, of course, as a result of an accident like this, and of course the 3rd major wreck at Pocono in the last half-decade, it drew a lot of response from fans, from media, from critics. This was a crash that had mainstream public attention. It was seen on BBC Sport. It was published on Sky Sports News. The Sun picked up on it in the UK. Don't buy the Sun; they're twats. But you get the gist. It is a crash that had legitimate crossover media attention. Now, this caused an explosive debate on the internet regarding the track, whether it's too dangerous for IndyCar, the accident itself, the drivers. I mean, I don't know where you even start with this one, but I'm going to try anyway. Because, of course, when it comes to this sort of thing, we like to play the blame game. It's easy to pin this all on Takuma Sato when it's not entirely 100% on him. It's a free wide. I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't know why they felt the need to go so aggressive on the first lap on a 500-mile race. It may have something to do with the fact that these aero kits are hard to pass around and whatnot, and that probably doesn't help. So you're probably thinking the best place you're going to make ground is the start of a race where all the cars are bunched up together and whatnot, especially on a track like Pocono where you can run 3 wide quite easily. On the main straight you can run 6 or 7 wide. We've seen it in the past where we've had 7 wide restarts at Pocono, and it's not ideal, to say the least. And I know a lot of people will pin this down to driver trust. I mean, look at it. It's a 3 wide and they crashed in a straight line. It's never a good look. But it doesn't help either when the spotters are in such an awful location to pinpoint where their cars are on the run down to turn 2. It's at ground level. It's not ideal. So it's hard to pin this all on Takuma. It's easy to, because at face value and at full racing speed, it looks like it's his fault. But there's more to it than that. Like I said, this blew up emotionally. There was 2 extreme camps on this. There was the camp that this track is too dangerous and they shouldn't race around here anymore. And there's also the camp that was stringent on defending the sanctity of the raceway in general, and that, you know, this is motorsport, you know, this is dangerous, etc. Whereas I think my overall point is going to be that the reality is it's probably somewhere in the middle. And breaking down both sides is hard, especially when one of the most prominent IndyCar drivers in the field, Robert Wickens, was one of the first to publicly comment. And as far as I'm aware, this is probably the first time Robert has talked about his accident and the nature of it at Pocono since it happened last year. And he put a tweet that went pretty darn viral about the situation. And I'll read it out to you now. I'll put it on the screen as well. And I quote, "How many times do we have to go through the same situation before we can all accept that an IndyCar should not race at Pocono? It's just a very toxic relationship, and maybe it's time to consider a divorce. I'm very relieved to my knowledge that everyone is okay from that scary crash." And I find it amazing that people have the audacity to fansplain to Robert Wickens, "I disagree with you." Robert went through a crash that nearly took his life, and it's a career-altering crash, one that you know could be life-altering in the grand scheme of things. It's not easy, and Wickens is getting fansplained in the comments. I just find that mind-boggling. But these are the same people that will lap up all the positive press and the PR that's come from his recovery to even get to this point where we still have hope that he could be an Arrow McLaren driver by the time he comes back due to the nature of their recent takeover. So, yeah, it's frustrating to see that. Like, a lot of people... I mean, look at it this way. From one side of the fence to the other, I know a lot of people that are involved in IndyCar. I know fans that are involved in IndyCar. Some of them are guest hosts on the podcast. Some of them have had guest roles on the podcast before. A very good friend of mine, Zoe Hamilton, who you know is a guest on this show. It was her first IndyCar race after 13 years of following the sport as a fan from Scotland, which, you know, is amazing. And I know a good friend of mine that actively said to me and people on Twitter, "I am never going to this race again." and this person lives in the Midwest where Pocono is, and it's their closest IndyCar race to go to by a mile. And it's hard to argue with that when they've literally seen a driver die at the track and another very easily lose their life. It draws emotions out of people. And I can't blame them for thinking that way. This track has got a knack of producing hellacious accidents. Is that all on the track? Probably not. I mean, it kind of says it all when the drivers are split on the situation. It doesn't take an awful lot to go out of their way to, see that the drivers are split. There was a press conference release, a question during the press conference to the podium runners, i.e. Will Power, who won the race, Scott Dixon, who finished second, and Simon Pagenaud, who finished third. They were asked a question of, gentlemen, we saw some comments during the race from Robert Wickens and Sage Karam. Sage Karam, for you guys who don't know, was involved in the 2015 wreck that took Justin Wilson's life. They were asked whether IndyCar should be running here at Pocono in the future. What are your thoughts? Dixon talked about how hard the people there work, and the incidents that they had could have happened anywhere. Power talked about the attendance being up, and Pagenaud talked about how much he enjoyed racing there. I'm going to put their comments on that side of the screen, and I'm going to leave them up there for a few seconds so you can read them, or you can just pause the video and basically gather your overall thoughts on that. But that's one side of the equation. My more cynical belief is that if a driver's in the press conference after they've won, they're not going to talk about the Grand Prix they've just won and say, nah, we shouldn't race here anymore. They have sponsors and teams to attest, and they have PR to work. They are not going to talk ill of a track and the people that work in it after they've won there and accepted their grace and hospitality. The other side of the coin, we had Sage Karam talk about it publicly. We had Robert Wickens talk about it publicly in a negative light. James Hinchcliffe, who was caught up in the accident, was interviewed after the race, or after the accident he was involved in, and he said, well, anyone that saw last year's race should know how I feel about this, basically. Or I'm paraphrasing here because I can't remember his direct quote. But Hinchcliffe said, and it was said over the intercom, he does not like how IndyCar runs it. And that's a brave thing to say, because IndyCar actively has a rule where you can't speak out against the series in disrepute. And that's what makes it hard, and that's what makes it so bold for him to say. We had the Lap 1 incident. Marco Andretti, who, again, a big name in the series. Again, it was said on his team radio after the accident, and Zoe mentioned this, and she sent it to me via text. I'll find the exact quote she sent me, and it was like, Marco on the radio after that crash, and pardon my French here, fuck this fucking place. So the drivers are clearly split on this too, which doesn't exactly help either. And of course, when this happened, when people speak out about some of the negative side of the crashes and the incidents and the track in general, people will come out of the woodwork defending the sanctity of motorsport, talking about how it's always going to be dangerous. Shut up and enjoy the racing. I got a guy that literally tweeted me saying, shut up and enjoy the racing. And I'm like, fuck off with that take. It's not as simple as that. And we know it's not as simple as that. Yes, there is absolutely an increased inherent amount of risk of taking part in motorsport, especially when it's oval racing, when they're averaging 200 to 230 miles an hour, depending on what track they're racing around. Of course there is. I'm not stupid. I wasn't born yesterday. I just don't like that we also have two conflicting cultures in motorsport that I don't like. Nature of motorsport, number one. We talk about the drivers as heroes. I've said it before. I've said it in countless videos. There is an element of hero worship that comes with that. One where we look at the drivers as heroes, and whatever they say goes. We admire them because they do things in cars that we could only dream of. I've said it before, it's kind of like the soccer dad mentality, where it's like it's a big thing in the UK, right? Because football's or soccer, as they would say in the United States, is a much more popular sport in Europe. And a lot of people grew up wanting to be footballers who never made it. So when they have a son or a daughter and they're playing football, they harass the refs, or they push their opinions on their kids because they are living the dream that they could never have. I've never looked at guys in motorsport that way. I look at them as gladiators. Guys who fought for combat fame and money. Because, again, another argument I got during that race was, well, these guys get paid, millions of pounds. It's okay. Look, sometimes the drivers need saving from themselves, okay? They are never going to say we shouldn't, it's a rare opinion where they say we shouldn't race here. And it boils down to a hard question of what is an acceptable amount of risk to take. It's hard to speak out because any driver like Hinchcliffe or Marco or Sage that talks about the nature of the series like that in a negative will get jumped on because it goes against the grain. We like the danger and the risk element of motorsport. A lot of fans do. For so many fans, they get off on that enjoyment. It's what makes it so thrilling and so captivating. So to speak out against it is often so hard. But at the same time, during that repair, it was a 50-minute red flag during that race. During that repair, we also saw the fence that Rosenquist go into be fixed by chicken fence and zip ties. After a car can go into that barrier at over 150 miles an hour, that is not going to save anybody. Pocono's catch fence is already rusty as fuck, and now you're fixing it with chicken fence. It's an awful look for the series. It's an awful look for the racetrack that is deemed an acceptable repair job. It's an awful look. It's partly why Max Chilton commented on it as well. And Chilton quit racing on ovals because he didn't see the risk. Guys like Mike Conway quit racing on ovals in the past as well for that very reason. For them, it just wasn't worth it. And that's hard. It's hard. It's hard when we look at drivers as we care more about the drivers than the sport itself. It's hard when we look at them as heroes. It's hard of them when we expect them to be brave because we pay them so much. There's a level of entitlement from fans that comes towards it. And that's hard. It's a hard thing to handle and juggle. It also sucks that we don't like talking about safety because, like I said, safety talk only seems to happen in motorsport when something really bad happens. We are not proactive when it comes to conversations about safety. We only talk about it in the wake of something really bad happening. We talk about it more when Wickens had his accidents, or whenever we get a really bad one in Formula 1 and the halo came into play. We all had an opinion when the halo came in, right? And the halo has now proven to have saved lives since it's been inhabited into Formula 1 and Formula 2. But when something big happens, that's when everybody chimes in with their 2 cents. When we're proactive about something about it, you get shut down for being a coward or for being a pussy. It happens all the time. Like I said, it happened when Nico Rosberg retired. Prominent people called him a coward because he didn't defend his title. It's the exact same talk about safety. It's like, oh, well, racing's dangerous. Who cares about safety? It's going to be dangerous whatever happens. Yeah, we know that. But if we can take some minor steps to improve things here and there that doesn't have an overall dramatic effect on the racing, which in IndyCar is generally very good, why can't we do that? Why can't we have that conversation without people getting very defensive about the state of motorsport or the series in general? That's another thing I don't like about it. And the 2 extremes are annoying because, yeah, it sucks that Pocono's had a knack of producing these accidents. Was yesterday's incident an inherent problem with Pocono as a track? Not really. They crashed in a straight line. The catch fence didn't help. So, yeah. Is it entirely Pocono to blame? No, not in the slightest. Is the track also inherently kind of dangerous for the racing that's on display? Absolutely yes. It can be both. They're not mutually exclusive. It doesn't help when you put into context the nature of Pocono as a track. Yes, it's a super speedway, but it also is a very poor one. It's a lot like Silverstone, and hear me out when you hear this comparison, because you're going to be thinking, wait, Silverstone? Silverstone is a track that is the most popular on the F1 calendar. It gets 140,000 fans on race day. Yet the track loses money and doesn't have a lot of cash in the bank year to year. Because Silverstone as an overall race venue loses money every time it's raced. It's why its position on the calendar has been threatened numerous times in the last couple of years. They don't make enough money over a calendar year to keep it open half the time. It's hard for them to justify having an F1 race when it's not profitable. It's the same or a similar deal with Pocono. It doesn't get a lot of race meetings over a calendar year. It's not a massively popular racetrack. It's not Indianapolis, another super speedway where all the money is. Of course, the Indy 500 is the big winner for the IndyCar calendar. We talked about it a lot in the 25/8 video we had on this channel earlier this season. The 500 pays so much more than any other race on the calendar. That's why you get 37 entrants taking part in it every year compared to 23, 24 regulars for the rest of the calendar. And, you know, the nature of the regulars wanting a guaranteed spot. That fuels up the debate where that's concerned. But Indianapolis is where all the money is. They can afford to have these brilliant safer barriers and to have constant maintenance to their catch fence and safety discussions every year because they have money coming in. Pocono doesn't have that luxury. I mean, I would love for Pocono to have the safer barrier that Indianapolis has. We saw it in action a couple of years ago when Sebastian Bourdais had that awful wreck when he hit the outside wall at 230 miles an hour. Yes, he cracked his pelvis, but he made a full recovery and was back in the car later that same season. We don't have that luxury at Pocono, which is why Rosenqvist went into the catch fence when he had his accident. It doesn't have the money to have the luxury to be able to afford to have the same level of safety discipline that Indianapolis has. And I would love to see IndyCar go out of its way to have a minimum safety requirement for a track like that, because it would certainly put at ease a lot of people's fears about its nature as a racetrack if it had better safety compared to other super speedways we have on the calendar like Texas and like Indy. So it sucks when you factor all of this in to the nature of Pocono as a race weekend and just the emotion we have as fans, especially ones who understandably have had a lot of distressing things happen at that racetrack in the last half decade. Combine that with a track that does have inherent problems and doesn't help when it comes to safety issues. The poor spotters, the poor catch fence. What happens if you snag a pole like Robert Wickens did? You know? Those elements don't help. It's understandable that people would have doubts as to whether the track is fit to run an IndyCar race or for oval racing in general. Even if the accidents involved in them necessarily aren't necessarily the track's fault. When you've got two highly emotionally strung camps, the camp that just wants everybody to be okay, to maybe pushing the safety argument a bit too hard compared to the other side of the camp that will do anything to defend the sanctity of motorsport and the culture of motorsport, the drivers, you know, the gladiatorial nature of and the gladiatorial aspect of the sport, and, you know, not wanting anything that can damage their beloved racing. When the reality is blurry and somewhere in the middle of those two camps, we get this emotional distress and we get these intense, hardcore discussions like we got on Sunday. And the short answer is, there is no easy answer. And that's what sucks, because, hey, there's actually a good possibility it might be both. We might have to have a bit more safety on this track, and we also might not have to necessarily get rid of Pocono for that to happen either. Maybe we as fans are a little bit too emotional about these things in the first place, where if cool heads can sometimes prevail, you know, we can find some common ground. And that's not just a racing thing. That can probably happen to many elements of life that we're in right now as an environment. It's hard. I haven't really got an overall point. I'm somewhere in the middle on this. I was more towards that safety camp myself when I first saw it, but as time has gone on, people have made valid points on both sides. That's where you guys come in. I'd love to hear your perspectives on the situation, because it's not easy. It's not an easy one to handle, and I don't think there's an easy answer to solve all of this, because it's hard, and it instills debate. We had a fantastic debate on the podcast this week about it. Go see episode 208 later this week. It's me, it's Ryan King, and it's Cam Buckley, and we had a fantastic discussion about it in general, and how the reality of the situation is somewhere in the middle. But of course, this draws angry responses from both sides of the fence, and it gets messy. But let me know what you guys think. I would love to hear your perspectives on this. I've tried my best to give both sides of the argument, and I'm in the middle myself. Normally, I'm pretty adamant in picking a side when it comes to these things, as you've probably seen in previous videos. This time, I'm not so sure. And that's why I kind of made this video, because I didn't have an overall point that I wanted to make. Besides, this is tricky. This is right down the middle of what you could deem as, an issue for IndyCar and for the series going forward. How would you go about it? I'd love to hear you guys' perspective on it. But thank you very much for watching. Of course, please subscribe if you liked the video. You can find me on social media at Harrison101HD. And you can find the podcast, Motorsport 101, at Motorsport_101. Our website with all written blogs and all our episodes of the podcast are available on motorsport101.com. And if you really like us, you can back us financially on Patreon, patreon.com/motorsport101. I've been Dre Harrison. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you guys next time. Thanks for watching. Sayonara.